Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Courtney Yockey, and I'm with the F&M Regional Growth Alliance, and here today representing the Business Navigator Alliance of South Central and Southeastern Illinois. We have an excellent presentation stored for you today. Increases in energy prices have been at top of mind for businesses and residents alike, and we will be diving into that topic today. We have assembled a panel of experts to guide us through today's discussion. For today, we have Mark Pruitt with Bureau LLC to give us a macro view of the energy sector, discuss possible short-term and long-term solutions, and review incentives and tax credits. Then we have Brian Bradley with North American Lighting, who's going to speak towards efforts North American Lighting has taken to mitigate the impact of rising energy costs. Then we have Jeff Alvey with AGCO, who's going to cover AGCO sustainability projects and the utilizations of incentives. But to start off today's presentation, we have Connor Griffin, who's going to do a quick review of what the Business Navigator Alliance of South Central and Southeastern Illinois is. Connor is currently an intern for Coles Together and is studying business management at SIUE. He has completed the basic economic development course through the International Economic Development Council and has experience doing contractual work for an economic development consultant. Connor also has experience in baking and retail and hopes to find a full-time position in economic development upon graduation. Connor, are you ready?
I am. Thank you, Courtney. So we'll start off with what is the Business Navigator Alliance of South Central and Southeastern Illinois. We are a 6-county regional collaboration working through a small business community navigator grant. This contains Angela Griffin of Coles Together, Lori Miner, Sullivan, Illinois Chamber and Economic Development, Risa Shaner, Crawford County Development Association, Nora Swalls, Marshall Area Chamber of Commerce, and Bob Colvin and Freddie Smitty of Paris Economic Development Corporation, and Courtney Yockey, Effingham Regional Growth Alliance. This group is charged with professional outreach and technical assistance for local, state, and federal programs. Our mission is to ensure that small businesses in our region are competitive in applying for necessary resources, and our goal is to position you to be successful by accelerating business recovery and growth. Next slide, please. See the map to the side of your screen for where the Business Navigator Alliance is located. Today's webinar is part of a series of business webinars we are hosting each month. These webinars are scheduled for the last Thursday of each month, so mark your calendars and visit www.ilbusinessnavigators.com and sign up for our newsletter to stay informed. We also host various outreach events, office hours, and offer one-on-one technical assistance. Again, visit www.ilbusinessnavigators.com to learn more, and we will post the recording from today and the presentation and additional supportive materials on the website as well. Now it's my pleasure to introduce our first keynote speaker, Mark Pruitt. Mark has more than 25 years of experience in the energy commodity and supply and energy efficiency markets. He was the first director at Illinois Power Agency and is currently an adjunct professor with Northwestern's Master of Science in Engineering Sustainability program. Mark advises communities on municipal aggregation and organizations on energy procurement issues, and he founded the Bureau LLC. And if you're ready, Mark, the floor is yours.
Very good. Thank you all, and thank you for the invitation. Much appreciated, and hopefully we can provide some information that's useful today. Let's just go ahead and start through the presentation. So just a quick agenda. Happy to have any of the folks introduce themselves. I'll give a little bit of my background as we step through the presentation. But the real meat of the matter is we want to talk about the market conditions, primarily for electricity and natural gas. Then we want to look at what are some options for addressing those price patterns that we're experiencing now. And a lot of that discussion is going to really hinge on and focus on state and federal level incentives for different types of energy production, energy efficiency, and the like. And then, of course, I'll be available to answer any questions at the end. Next slide, please. So as you heard, I'm an independent consultant with the Power Bureau. I also have a a separate company that deals exclusively with municipalities. When I was at the state of Illinois, my agency was responsible for negotiating wholesale power contracts for Ameren and Commonwealth Edison. Before that, I managed natural gas and electricity purchasing for the state agencies at a research entity at University of Illinois. And before that, I worked to develop cogeneration and energy efficiency projects for Northern Illinois Gas. Next slide. So I guess the takeaway is I'm old, but I can still remember things. So hopefully some of what we've got here resonates with you. Let's talk about market conditions first. Unlike the next slide, please. Unlike the last, say, 10 years, we've just run into a storm in the energy markets, both here in Illinois, regionally, nationally, and internationally. What I tried to present here is just a quick graph showing the forward prices for electricity dating back through June of 2019. So what the graph says is that in June of 2019, you could have locked in a price for electricity to be delivered in 2022. That's what the forward market is. Since June of 2020, the cost of those forward market prices for wholesale electricity in central southern Illinois has gone up 150%. That's the dashed line you're seeing there, that going from June 2020 all the way through June 2022. And it's up across the board. It's not as severe in the future years, but it's still quite a bit of a price shock. The drivers here, the reasons for this are largely increases or recovering demand after COVID, and then much higher natural gas prices. Next slide, please. Natural gas prices have seen a similar pattern since 2020, January of 2020, right around there. Gas prices in this region have gone up 120%. It's largely due to kind of delayed increases in domestic production. We've seen demand grow, but we haven't seen supply grow. And in that tightening, that's caused prices for natural gas to go up. And in our region, when natural gas prices go up, so does the cost of electricity. So, you know, you're really in this kind of a tough spot with supply and demand, with additional complication that now the United States is moving as much liquefied natural gas out of the North American market over to Europe. And that's tightening supplies even more. Next slide. Another issue that is specific to central southern Illinois is capacity. So capacity is a fee that is paid to power plant owners that guarantees that those power plants will be operable in the event that they're needed to keep the system stable and operating. As you see in the chart, the cost for the price for capacity is jumped up and down over the years, but in this most current period, the 2022 to 23 period, all the way over on the right, it's the highest it's ever been in Illinois. If you're trying to figure out, okay, well, what does $236.66 per megawatt day mean to me? Look over at the bottom bullet over on the left. So this is a charge that is applied to every account in Ameren. So if you have a peak demand that's equal to 1 megawatt, or which is the equivalent of 1,000 kilowatts, this increase in cost is about $85,000 just for this 1 year. So this is another huge driver. It's not just factories, but it's also every household pays capacity fees. So this on top of the commodity is what's really driving that price in central southern Illinois. Next slide. So that's the bad news. What can you do about it? So energy options, next slide. We'll just take a look at a few. I mean, there's, my business is kind of talking through all of these, but, for today, what I thought we would do is just settle on and focus on those solutions that are within the red boxes. So when we're talking about, what can I do? Your options fall into three categories. There's mitigation, which means you're transferring price risk over to someone else. And, examples of that are, getting a fixed price supply contract or installing on-site solar, right? You're pushing that risk off. Under reduction, that's making a permanent reduction in your energy consumption. And, LED lighting upgrades and insulation are good examples of that. And then offsets. Offsets are, selling some of your excess electricity back to the grid and, taking in that revenue and using that revenue to offset some of your energy costs. The items I'm just going to touch on primarily from here on out are on-site generation and storage, primarily solar, off-site generation, and then energy efficiency. Next slide. So a lot of these options come with a number of incentives at the state and federal level. I'm not going to read this table to you. This table's here mostly to prove that your consultant does a lot of research. So the research here is these are all the programs that were included in the Climate and Equitable Jobs Act legislation passed last year. So these are programs that Ameren is obligated to fund and implement under that legislation. And as you see here, the cost grows. Just this bill alone has a price tag in the Ameren region of about $216 million in 2022, and that escalates up to $360 million in 2026. What I always try to be clear about is this is all ratepayer money, right? This is money that's being collected on your utility bill. So if you don't want to participate in these programs, that's fine. You're paying for someone else to do it. So my recommendation is you got a lot of options here. Maybe some of these are things that can benefit you and get you a little bit of a return for the fees that are being charged on your bill. Next slide, please. First is a very popular program for rooftop solar. And what you have here on the table is a list of the incentives that your utility will pay for distributed generation. That's what DG stands for different size rooftop solar projects. And there are incentives here at the state level. The utility also has another incentive called a smart inverter rebate. But when it's all said and done, these incentives will pay for, could be 40, perhaps a little bit more percent of the cost of your solar installation. There's two ways most people go about doing solar installs. One is the customer simply buys the system. You find a contractor who's qualified to do the work and you buy the system, you take the incentive and you reduce your energy deliveries from the utility and you realize a lower cost. The other option is called a power purchase agreement. That's where the contractor continues to own the system after it's installed, and you simply buy the electricity from that system. You don't own it, you don't maintain it. So those are two options, but both of those options qualify for these incentives. So these incentives coupled with other incentives can make that solar resource much more affordable. Next slide. You can, if you're a larger entity, you can work with offsite renewables. And that merely means you're going to buy some or all the output of a large utility scale wind or solar resource that's not connected to your building. These are sometimes called book transactions or virtual power purchase agreements. They're a bit more sophisticated, but you've probably heard about these. This is what the city of Chicago is doing with their recently announced renewable energy purchase for city facilities. This is how Google and Facebook and those companies purchase renewables so that they can meet their own environmental goals. So this transaction is very long-term. You're looking at a 10 to 20-year commitment, but in the end, what you're doing is you're going to be responsible for putting more renewable energy into the grid that is equal to or maybe even larger than the energy you take from the grid. So it's a way of replacing your consumption with renewable energy. Next slide. And back down to plain old-fashioned efficiency, which probably should be the starting point for anybody. Just like on that table from a little bit earlier that showed all the programs and how much they're being spent. I just invite you to take a look at just one number here. Go down to about midpoint on the graphic from the most recent Ameren Energy Efficiency Program report, and you'll see portfolio overall spend achievement program year to date, PYTD. Look at that first line there. That $122 million, that is the amount of incentives that Ameren is going to be paying out to consumers to make energy efficiency upgrades at their homes and facilities. So again, the money's going to be spent. It's being collected. It's going to be spent. The question is, can you have some of that directed towards a project that's beneficial for your home or your business? Next slide. So those are all state incentives, right? And a lot of those incentives flow through the utility. There are also federal incentives, and a number of them have been, I think people have been hearing about them in relation to the Inflation Reduction Act. Inflation Reduction Act has about $325 billion in incentives for clean energy over the next 10 years. I'm not going to go through all these, but this is just a very big piece of legislation, big price tag, lots and lots of programs in here. We'll talk about some of these and break them down for you, but just suffice to say, this is pretty, long list. It was about a 900-page bill, so there's a lot in there. So let's go through and see if some of these might be helpful to you. Next slide. So most of these incentives are tax incentives, right? So first thing to think about is most of these incentives look like they're talking code, section 48 ITC, section 45 PTC. These are all sections of the internal revenue of the tax code, right? So these are all tax benefits that will be defined from a rule standpoint by the IRS, and they provide tax credits, tax rebates, and other types of tax-based incentives for consumers. So just prepare yourself that when you start reading some of this, you're going to be like, this is like reading the tax code. That's because you are. These are mostly tax-based. Next slide. So the two big ones, right, are the investment tax credit and the production tax credit. These are tax credits that are paid to owners of new wind and solar and geothermal type of resources. The production tax credit is volumetric, meaning that as the asset generates electricity, it earns the credit, right? So the more it generates, the more tax credit it receives. The investment tax credit is a tax credit based on the cost to build the system, right? So you get that investment tax credit right up front, right? When that system is energized. The production tax credit is paid out over first 10 years of operation. Next slide. There are incentives for residential work. So if you look at section 25D, which is also known as the Residential Energy Efficiency Property Credit, you can get a 30% tax credit for projects that are installed before 2031. Those projects include solar PV, fuel cells, small wind energy, geothermal heat pumps, and battery storage, right? So a lot of the things you might be thinking about already that you can get an incentive from the local utility. You can also file and apply for a tax benefit as well. So you can stack these benefits together. There's also the new energy efficient home credit. So this is for new homes, not existing homes. And it can be on the low end, anywhere from $2,500 per housing unit to $5,000 per housing unit, depending upon the level of efficiency that is reported. And then it also applies for multifamily accounts as well. So if you're in the home building business, this might be something to consider in terms of, okay, well, if I can make my new construction more efficient and we can receive a benefit from that to offset the cost of those higher cost systems, maybe that pencils out. Next slide. So there's also direct credits to technologies. CO2 sequestration is now back on the front burner. And there are incentives now that weren't around before, to my knowledge. And if you're in the sequestration business or you're capturing CO2 to convert it into another product, you know, there's a tax benefit here, and it's fairly significant and ongoing. There's also an alternative fuel refueling property credit, which means that if you put in a charging station for EVs or biodiesel, you can receive tax incentives for those types of activities as well. Next slide. Again, I'm not going to read all this to you, but just trust me, this is a sleeper. This is really good. Section 179D is the energy efficient commercial buildings credit. So there's a standard credit that says, you know, you can get 50 cents a square foot tax benefit if you bring the overall energy efficiency of your building down 25% below the building code that was in place 4 years before the building was occupied. So anybody who has a facility that is maybe 10 years old, 20 years old, and they are thinking about updating their HVAC, their insulation, and their LED lighting, they're probably going to reduce their total consumption below that target, and they're eligible for this 50 cents a square foot. If they exceed the 25% reduction, they get an extra 2 cents a square foot. So this is something that, you know, can really make a difference. My understanding is that now this is available not only for taxable entities, but also tax exempt entities. So there's a way to make this work for schools, municipal buildings, and the like. Next slide. And then on to the conclusions. So just very quickly, next slide. You know, the markets are choppy and they're high, and they're probably going to be there for a while. There's a lot of concern about economic cycles and where we're going to be at, you know, 5, 6, 7 months down the road. And we're all being asked to do more with less. So my encouragement to you is to not just throw up your hands, but to really dig in and say, okay, look, there are these resources available. How can we capture them for our own personal needs, our business community needs, and then from a regional economic development point of view, you know, maybe it makes sense to really focus on this and try to optimize and capture as much of these incentives as possible, and bring that into your own local economy. Next slide. You know, the incentives are plentiful. They're a little confusing. I get it, but that's why you've got smart contractors that you're going to hear from next. Modestly smart people like me who do a lot of reading. We can point you in the right direction, but it's there, right? It's discoverable. And if you want to do this, it only makes sense because in the end, you're paying for it. So again, try to grab everything that you can that's legitimate. And if you set yourself up with a little bit of planning, I'm pretty sure you can get pretty far. So with that, thank you very much. And I appreciate your time and the invitation.
Excellent, excellent presentation, Mark. A lot of valuable information. Wow, really blown away from your presentation. That was very wonderful. If you have questions for Mark, or if you have any questions for any of the other panelists, please put them in the chat. We will save Q&A. We will save all the questions until the Q&A section after the presentations. We had some questions come in. They come in as direct messages to me, but I've got them noted here, and go ahead and put them in the chat, and that way everybody can see what you're asking as well. And hopefully everybody was taking notes during Mark's presentation. Just a quick reminder, we will send out a copy of the slides and a copy of the recording this webinar next week in a follow-up email for everybody that had registered for today. Up next, we have Brian Bradley from NAL. Brian is the Assistant General Manager of Corporate Manufacturing Engineering for North American Lighting at their corporate headquarters in Paris, Illinois. Brian has been with NAL for 20 years and is responsible for corporate process engineering, corporate facilities engineering, and corporate environmental engineering. Brian, are you ready for your presentation, sir?
Yes, thank you, Courtney. Next page, please. Real about North American Lighting here. We are the largest automotive lighting manufacturer in North America. We've been manufacturing since 1983. Next slide, please. So in summary on energy management, NAL has looked to increase our energy reductions because of volatility, which Mark spoke about very well, to the global conflicts and initiatives moving forward for clean energy. NAL has also mitigated the impacts because we do add strategic energy management practices. Next slide, please. So existing conditions, the rate increases, as Mark showed real well on his graph, the commodity prices are up for both electric and natural gas, and they've significantly impacted NAL's budget over the last 2 years. Also, the capacity charges, the MISO auctions have been a large impact to NAL many times over as far as percentage of dollars. What we try to do is we're going to mitigate this by our strategic energy management. How we're doing this for our objectives, we're going to comply with all obligations and other related energy management outcomes. We also promote energy efficiency, continual improvement of our programs, and we also set objectives to support our programs and review them on a regular basis with the plants, also with their environmental objectives in the same process. And then also any customer-driven initiatives, which we work through the Manufacturing 2030 program with all our major vendors to improve our efficiencies and record all of our energy-saving ideas. Next slide, please. Major elements of our energy management plan listed there. I'm going to go through each one of these individually. Next slide, please. So energy procurement. Similar graph to what Mark showed. The market volatility, as you can see, has took such a major increase here in the late, and it's making everybody's bills for gas and electricity definitely go higher. And we also use the state of Illinois. They do provide a list of vendors for market competition, so you can actually get better rates and through different vendors. Next slide, please. Also renewable energy, Mark spoke about. Both the state and federal have got several programs. Illinois has backed several programs to do renewable projects. Also the Federal Reduction Act, which gives you the tax credits. We have looked at both ground mount and surface mount solar here. It would save about 7% of our total load right now. So it's a project we may be looking into here in the future. Next slide, please. Preventative maintenance. This is a big item for NAL. We have an automated system that we use for our maintenance, preventative maintenance and stuff. The plants have implemented a compressed air leak check detection program that has worked out very well. And also we've been doing some HVAC recommissioning and getting some assistance from Ameren on the active energy programs. Next slide, please. We've also used building management systems. Everybody probably does the same thing as what we do here, but we've reduced our actual temperatures and any offsets when offices are vacant. We've tried to turn down temperatures and everything else to save some electricity. We also do a demand on control for any systems running. We will actually use outside air and we will turn these units off when products are not running or something to reduce the overall cost. And we also monitor our peak demand. This peak demand helps us shift production to off hours or something to help reduce components of our electric bill. Next slide, please. Lighting controls, big item here. We've switched a lot of LED existing facilities for the older fixtures to LEDs. We also do something called daylight harvesting. We do a lot of skylights. It actually reduces the lighting outputs on most of our lights. And also on that too, it's a big thing for morale. People inside a building or whatever, they can see light throughout the day. It definitely, you wouldn't believe how much it boosts their morale to see that and see the sunlight out throughout the day. And also occupancy sensors. That's a big item in our warehouse areas. If we got a lane that hasn't been used for a while, then you can turn on whenever somebody's there. It's been a good energy savings for us. Next slide, please. Process controls. We actually are recovering heat from our processes to dump into the plants for using extra heat energy. We also, as I mentioned, we do shut off our outside air makeup units to modulate. So whenever the air not being used, it's actually shutting the units down to save. We also have saved big on our air logic control systems. Running 5 or 6 compressors, we now can get down to running 3 for the plant instead of 5. And also we put VFDs and pumps on our pumps for the process water to actually reduce that demand so they can run at maybe a 20% instead of being full load all the time. Next slide, please. As Mark spoke well, we do use the Ameren Act on Energy program very much. We've got a lot of incentives from them. We have several recommissionings, lighting upgrades, special projects we've done with Ameren, and we also have done some through the Illinois Municipal Electric Association through our Florida plant. Next slide, please. Also, in conclusion, like I say, NAL, we continue to strive to reduce electricity, be a good energy partner, environmental partner. We do work with the major vendors to reduce our carbon footprint by 2% each year, and we plan on being net zero by 2050. So that kind of concludes where I'm at. I appreciate your time today, and if you've got any questions, my contact information will be there on this slide.
Great job, Brian. Excellent presentation, and thank you for walking through the everything that NAL has done to help mitigate the cost of energy and how to really stay ahead of the curve and be proactive. Excellent presentation. Thank you for that insight. Again, yes, sir. And again, if you have any questions, please throw them in the chat. We're going to save the questions till after all 3 presentations, and we'll jump into a Q&A section. But before that, we've got Jeff Alvey. And Jeff is the Advanced Project Manager with AGCO Grain and Proteins. Jeff has 16 years with Grain and Protein and has held various roles, including manufacturing engineering, quality and continuous improvement manager, and project manager. He has been responsible for developing and implementing large capital investment projects that have included machine purchases, building construction, operational moves, and site improvements. Jeff, are you ready to present, sir?
Yes, and thank you everyone for having me. So I want to start out a little bit talking about AGCO overall, because really in the Central Illinois region, you may be familiar with some of the brands versus AGCO overall. So what is AGCO? So AGCO is Challenger, Massey Ferguson, Valtra, Fendt, Grain and Protein, and Precision Planting. So really Challenger, Massey, Valtra, Fendt is the tractor and combine businesses. Precision Planting, that is in the Morton, Illinois and Tremont, Illinois area, is more on the digital ag solutions. Grain and Protein, so really in Central Illinois, many may be familiar with GSI. So GSI is the bin and silo business. Within that business unit prior, Cumberland, AP on the poultry and swine side of the business were big players as well. When AGCO acquired GSI a number of years ago, brand identity was one thing that we were kind of faced with, and rolled that up into Grain and Protein. Cambria and Techno are kind of more recent additions to Grain and Protein. Cambria on the seed side, and then Techno on the commercial ag. So talk about sustainability a little bit. So in AGCO, the purpose and the vision there. So farmer-focused solutions to sustainably feed our world, and trusted partner for industry-leading smart farming solutions. So everything that we want to do is farmer-focused, but also in a sustainable way. On the map there, you can kind of see the different locations represented in Illinois by warehouses, factories, and then in Champaign at the U of I, we have an office there, Research Park. If you go to the next slide. Okay, so when we talk about sustainability, we have an AGCO Star program. So what that is our tracking and reporting So the first thing that we've kind of kicked off and have been doing is measuring all of our utilities at all our sites, all our utility bills, all our water, electricity, gas, everything, just to kind of see where we're at, not only from a price standpoint of what we're paying, but then also what our consumption is. And then that kind of steers our plans into where we need to look at different opportunities, whether that's LED lighting, if we need to look at some natural gas, improvements, but then really track our process as we move forward. We are a publicly traded company, so it is really important that we measure everything that we do and we report accurate numbers. Go to the next slide. So a few projects kind of really focused here on the Central Illinois region. These are ones that I've been involved in. So starting out, Assumption, Illinois, this is kind of our largest facility in the area. So that is a 1 million square foot facility. In 2018, we put in a 8-acre solar energy site. That was the first one kind of in our company to get going. And then more recently, we built a smaller 40,000 square foot warehouse. Tried out new technology for us, Daystar skylights. So these are a little bit different than traditional skylights where they refract the lighting around, and then LED motion lights on the lights in there. We talk about factories and things like that, but we even did a renovation of our office. So looking at some not fully LEED certified, but different parts of that. How can we get more natural light into the space? Retrofitting existing lights into LED lights, trying to make the environment a better place to work in. Paris, Illinois. So recently we completed a 150,000 square foot building. Once again, put in Daystar skylights, LED motion lights with daylight harvesting that was kind of mentioned prior. Put in more natural windows, things like that. The R value on the roof, we went with a higher energy efficiency on that as well, just to really kind of capture, as much, heat and everything in that building as we can. ULT fume extraction units, really wanted to point these out as well, just due to, we think directly energy, lighting, things like that. But these fume extraction units that we put in, pull in the ambient air around welding. They pull in that fume, they filter the air out, they replace it back in. So what that really means is in the wintertime when we have we're heating the building, we can keep it sealed up. We don't have exhaust fans going around the building, getting those fumes out and recycling that air within our factory, as well as looking at LED lighting replacements in our existing facility. So also in Paris, right now we have the application in, just kind of waiting on state incentives to be released here in the next month or so. We have a 10-acre solar energy site that is pending, so that's 4.3 million kilowatt hours a year. Taylorville, Illinois, similar with some of the LED lighting upgrades, things like that. A number of years ago, we put in a plastic extrusion building that utilized a lot of different energy saving items as well. But on that site as well, we have a 7.5 acre solar energy site, which is also waiting for the same incentives to be released. It's about half the size output wise, but in our factories, it's still a pretty good size proportion that it will supply. You go to the next slide. So talked a little bit about pathways for savings. So I would say not so much on the federal level so far. I mean, the Inflation Reduction Act is something new. Haven't really tried out that, what that means for our business as much, at least, in my seat. Program allies with Airmen. I mean, this is really where we get our payback and savings on projects. And honestly, for a lot of the projects that we do, like LED lighting replacement, if we were not getting utility incentives on those, the payback would not be obviously not as good, but then from business sense, not as favorable as well. So there would be some hesitation on that depending on financial results and things like that. Next slide, please. So AGCO overall 2026 goals. So we want to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions by our net sales by 20%. And then also a renewable energy goal, 60% of total energy consumption derived from alternative and renewable sources. So obviously the solar energy areas will go a long way towards that, but we still have a lot to do in order to get to those goals. For us, there's a lot of cost, especially with the market projections looking at 2026 from where we are today. That's a big target to get to. Next slide, please. So once again, thank you for having me. Speak a little bit about AGCO. Did put a link in the slides. There's a lot of information about AGCO and some of the sustainability initiatives that the company is working towards.
Awesome, Jeff. Awesome. Thank you for walking us through what you guys there at AGCO are doing to mitigate the cost of energy and the processes that you put in place, and especially the tracking. And hearing about the UTL fume extraction units and recycling air, that I wasn't aware of something like that. I've not seen that before, and very interesting, very, very cool and innovative ideas. Thank you for sharing with us. And with that, that is our last presentation. We'll go ahead and jump into the Q&A section of today's webinar. And so if you have any questions, do throw them in the chat. And just a quick reminder, a copy of this recording of the webinar will be sent out to everyone in a follow-up email next week. And then we'll also include a copy of these PowerPoint presentation slides. And so you'll have everything with you. And then if the panelists provide any additional supplementary materials, we'll include that as well. And you can always see that at ilbusinessnavigators.com, and that's navigators with an S. And then so jumping into Q&A, I have a list of questions here, and please don't be scared to throw what you have in the chat. But the first question that came up was for Mark. And Mark, can you provide more details on how virtual power purchase agreements work?
Of course. So a virtual power purchase agreement, the first starting point is you're not having that electricity from that wind or solar farm delivered to your building, right? That's not happening. Instead, you're going to continue to purchase electricity from the grid, either through your retail energy supplier or through the utility. And what you're going to do is you're going to, as you're drawing that electricity out, somewhere else within the grid, your utility scale wind or solar project is going to be spilling electricity into the system, so that depending upon how much you're buying and how much you're using over time, you can set a goal. I want to offset 20%, 50%, 100% of my consumption with the electricity that I'm buying and having put into the regional grid on my behalf. It's kind of the top level concept. From a transactional concept, what's really happening is you enter into an agreement with the developer and you say, I'm going to buy every megawatt hour of electricity you put into the grid for $40 a megawatt hour. Every month, you two get together and you settle up. What you're settling up is you're going to pay that $40 a megawatt hour that you agreed to. In return, you're going to get the value of the electricity that was sold into the grid. It's called the LMP, locational marginal price. You get that back, plus the renewable energy credits. So you've got those renewable energy credits. They prove that they're like a receipt. They show that you have purchased renewable energy. And the cost of those credits is really the difference between your contract rate of $40 and whatever that LMP was in that month. Could be You know, the market value was 38, you paid 40, so you ended up paying $2 a megawatt hour. Could go the other way. You could have a contract rate of 40 and the market value of the electricity was $45, in which case you'll be paid the $5 difference. So it takes a lot of planning. It's a pretty sophisticated contract, but this is where I think a lot of the large energy users are going, especially those that need to offset 100% of their energy consumption. You know, you might not have the roof space, you might not have open land space, you might not be able to put a wind turbine in a given location. So this is a way to contract and make it work so that you can meet your goals.
Awesome. Thank you for clarifying on that additional avenue, that alternative that a business or even a municipality might be able to take. And Mark, the next question came in was, you're a first presenter. Most of the questions come in at the beginning was towards you, but for businesses that are buying in aggregate groups with pricing contracts about to expire, how should they plan for the large, possibly doubled price increases they're about to experience?
A lot of people are in that position, and that's tough because you're going to see a major step up in terms of your cost, and it's going to be hard to avoid. What I would be looking for right away is any availability of community solar subscriptions. In my estimation, that's the only way to get a discount in today's market, is to try to have a subscription with community solar, which means you get a share of the electricity generated by a community solar farm that's credited on your bill from the utility. That's really the only discount that I know that's available. I'd also say shop around. Firms like mine, you know, we're what are called agents, brokers, consultants. So we advise on how to put a bid out into the market, how to check contract terms, how to try to structure that price so that, yeah, it's going to be higher, but if there's any way to mitigate that, you know, we want to discover that, and you discover those things by casting a broad net to as many suppliers as you can.
Definitely understood there. And a follow-up to that question, a different one that came in a little later, but what are items that local governments should be focusing on with the increase in energy? So maybe a complement to what you just ran through.
Well, we work right now with about 20 municipalities around Chicago, where the municipalities have launched a program to help their residents get community solar subscriptions. I mean, for an average resident in Chicago, these subscriptions, they're worth maybe $200, maybe $300 in a really large house in terms of annual cost savings. Now, that's not everything, but you know, it's better than not. I think there's also, for municipalities, they could form a really good partnership with their local utility co-op, muni, or Ameren, to try to get as much participation in the energy efficiency programs as possible. Nothing works like not using the stuff, right? So that's going to be maybe another pathway that the municipalities can help with, because people tend to look to the municipality when they're having problems understanding how the energy market works, right? So if there are just a few tangible things that the municipalities can do, they should focus on those and just try to constantly refer people out to those efficiency options or community solar options or things that are going to help in the near term.
Thank you very much. And the next one, it'd be to Mark and Jeff. And just a reminder, if you got questions, if you have questions for a specific panelist or to the panel as a whole, please place them in the chat. But all three of the panelists today spoke about programs and savings of energies and savings of costs. And Mark, you had spoke about with Ameren and noted the $122 million in their program that they're getting ready to pay out for credits. And then Jeff, most certainly with your pathways for savings in Illinois. And the question came in with Jeff here, but where does somebody start if they're interested in solar or in some of these energy efficiency products and the associated credit? What's the starting point? Jeff, you want to tackle that one? And Jeff, you're muted, sir.
Sure. So I guess a good starting point is, a lot of the different contractors and things like that that are the program allies provide, some of the good information on that. Ameren does have a good website of some of those overviews. I believe in October in Springfield, actually at the Crown Plaza, they have a symposium where you can come and get some different information. You can also get some bonuses on your projects too. That's one that I typically go to because you get a bonus incentive on projects. There's different vendors there that can educate you there on, lighting, or if that's HVAC systems, or understanding your utility bills. So I think that's probably a good place to start.
Awesome. Mark, you have anything to add to that, sir?
No, I think that's super relevant advice. The utilities want these programs to work. They have to work, right? The utilities need consumers to take up these offers because profitability, company profitability is tied to them. So they're aligned with you, right? I think that if you're a business, and you're large enough, if you have a utility representative that's been assigned to your account, that might be another route you can take to get in and get the information that's specific to your needs. They're very educated, very well aware of how these things work. And, there's also a number of contractors that are, have been working in these programs for a long time, insulation, lighting, and others. And they might be another resource in case you're reluctant to go directly to the utility.
Excellent. Most certainly, reach out throughout your network and try to utilize whatever resources made available, especially in seeking information. And Mark, you had noted about for employers, the investment and the production tax credits, and just curious to that. They are separate programs, but can you use both? Can you exercise both? Is it one or the other?
Can you clarify the investment tax credit and production tax credit? Was that the basis?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
You get one or the other.
One or the other.
Right. Typically, solar projects tend to see better overall economics by utilizing the investment tax credit. Wind projects, biomass, fuel cells, I've seen most of them go for the production tax credit.
Awesome. And the next one here is for Brian. Brian, you noted a lot of things that NNL is running through and programs that you guys have put in place, and just inquiring on how do you choose where to divert resources to these energy efficiency projects?
So the different type of projects or the people? Are we talking?
I believe it was towards the different type of projects. Just in recognizing that resources are limited. It doesn't matter who you are. There's always some type of limitation. You've got to divert those resources to what you believe is going to be the best return of investment for you. And how do you choose that?
We actually go back and we look at the total picture of the project. So cost, what it's going to take time-wise and everything, and get a true ROI for the project. Mm-hmm. And then we look at that return on investment on time as versus, risk versus reward, smallest dollar amount for best gain. Mm-hmm. So like I say, we switch a lot of our injection molding machines from hydraulic to electric. Those are big gains on carbon and energy both. Solar is a great idea for everything. Problem is it is fairly expensive. Yeah. So you have to look at, what you're allowed for a payback. Most of our projects are usually 12 months or less. So we have to look at, projects that are going to be that way. So we really look at the cost versus everything and try to decide what's our best return on investment most times.
Understood, most certainly. And a follow up to that one, and you may have clarified it, but you talked about preventative maintenance, building management systems, lighting controls, the occupancy sensors. Just if you're a small business, and definitely note that the size of the investment, what you're looking into, can play a factor. But what should they start implementing first? What should they start working on, just in your opinion?
A lot of times, if you're in the Ameren network, you would try to look, because a lot of the LED incentives you can actually get offset from Ameren. So you can actually buy the lighting, a lot of times cheaper with the sensors inside the lights now. So if you actually do that, you can get some of that cost, even up to 50% of the cost, taken care of as an incentive. So probably part of that LED lighting, look at that. If the sensors are too much money, then actually get into the just the lighting itself. The prices have really come down, and size and everything have come down on these LED lights.
Most certainly. So shop around and weigh your decisions, make fiscally responsible decisions. But what I'm hearing is do something. Be proactive and try to encourage some savings.
Yeah, establish a budget. Decide what you really want to do, and then from establishing that budget, decide, okay, what kind of gain are you wanting to get, and break down your cost in that budget and say, okay, I'm willing to spend 20% on lighting or whatever. And you can look at those projects and say, okay, maybe solar, I got a small budget. I'm not going to try solar right now, but I can change LED lighting. I can change out a 20-year-old HVAC unit, those kind of things.
Awesome. Excellent advice, sir. And we're coming up on the 3 o'clock hour. We have a few questions that still come in. We'll continue on. We hope that you can continue to join us here. And if you have any additional questions, please throw them in the chat. The next one is for Jeff. Jeff, you noted the STAR program, the sustainability tracking and reporting. And question coming in was, did you guys build that yourself, or is that something that you purchased?
That is something that we have ongoing ourselves, kind of developed that. We have a whole sustainability team that specifically looks at this on a global scale. I'm not sure if that's a off-the-shelf type of software, but really it's kind of it follows some of the approaches of lean that we use in operations and things like that to just kind of define, measure, analyze, improve, and control. So
awesome. Thank you, sir. And a question came in for the chat here for Brian and Jeff. How do you decide on which of your facilities get the energy improvements, and how do you establish the queue? So Jeff, if you want to start off.
Yeah.
So I guess from AGCO side, I mean, really we've defined, what our measurements are today, and looking at that, and really it's the biggest bang for our buck on projects. I would say that right now we probably can't go fast enough on some of these projects. Things like LED lighting, things like that, we get different contractors involved and try to switch those out. So try to diversify as much as possible, just to try to take advantage of those incentives, get those projects in place, knowing that technology moves quickly, but try to get that established.
Brian, you have any additional comments towards that?
Yeah, we actually look at older facilities first a lot of times, because those are usually the worst efficiencies. But we also look at, back to the budget thing. If we can get incentives, as Jeff mentioned, that's always a plus. But you go for your best bang for your buck for sure. If LED lighting, that's a simple one. That's kind of low hanging fruit right there. When I started, we had all metal halide lighting, 400-watt lighting, to go to a T8, and then that actually to an LED now is great savings. So.
Awesome. Thank you, gentlemen. And the next one here is to Mark. Mark, you took us through the macro view of the energy sector and what's going on, and had noted significant increases and contributed some of that to significant increases in prices, and contributed that to some delays in production, the most certainly the increase in the van demand versus supply, and then the U.S. shipping natural gas over to Europe, and how that's tightening the market as well. How was the market pre-COVID? I mean, was it still tightening? Was it still starting of a increase, or how was it prior to COVID to where we are now?
Before COVID, I'd say from, I don't know, 2013, 2014 until COVID, things were very placid. We had more natural gas than what we really needed. So it you know, a little bit more, a little bit less. It didn't make that much of a difference in the market. And that fed over into electricity prices as well. The issues now are that, you know, we used to, because we didn't have the means to ship a lot of natural gas overseas, that the market price for natural gas was set by, you know, North American supply and demand. Now you've got international demand, and a lot of those international buyers are accustomed to paying 2 and 3 times the North American rate for natural gas. So I think that over time, the United States and the natural gas side probably starts entering into the international pricing arena of much higher natural gas costs, because now you know, you can buy it and move it somewhere else in the world where it has higher value.
So moving forward, I mean, most certainly, hopefully we eventually peak and kind of come down a little bit on the price of electricity, prices of natural gas. And by all means, natural gas the price was stagnant for a very long time, very low for a long time. What do you see the future happening? Will we get back to previous prices, or being that now we're kind of in this new market and the availability of being able to transfer some of these energy products to larger marketplaces, are we going to see eventually a return to prices that we've previously seen, or what do you think is going to happen? Get your magic ball out and let us know your opinion, at least.
All right. Well, I'll jump in on that. I think you will probably see some price reduction. It looks like indicators are of a recession in the next several months. If you go back and take a look at energy prices leading up to 2008, the last major recession, you saw a significant letdown in prices. So I expect you'll see that again, but instead of prices staying dormant for better part of 10 years, I think you'll probably be back at escalating prices maybe within a year or two of that price softening that we would expect to see at the beginning of a recession. So down, then back up.
And then we had a comment in the chat, Freddie, having working with both AGCO and NAL in Paris, that they do go after every possible incentive, and that's a compliment. It's part of the corporate DNA, and most certainly those that are with us live here today, or viewing this recording later, do encourage you to try to seek out those incentives and try to take advantage of what resources are made available for you. And if you're a resident or an employer, and try to make improvements to your operations, and ultimately will help you continue to invest in other places in your business as well. And so that was the end of our questions for today. Want to say thank you to our presenters today. Ran us through a lot of wonderful information. It was an excellent webinar today. Very gracious that you guys are willing to take some time out of your day and educate us on the energy sector and give us some insight into what your operations have been doing, and encourage people to try to take advantage of some of these incentives, some of these resources. So thank you kindly for willingness to educate us today, and for participating in today's webinar. Again, just a quick reminder, a copy of the recording will be sent out next week if you registered, and then it'll be on our website as well, and that is ilbusinessnavigators.com. That's navigators with an S. When you go to our website, sign up for the newsletter. We'll let you know when the next upcoming events are coming. We have these webinars on the last Thursday of each month. Next one coming up for October is on the 27th, and recognizing that October is the National Women's Business Month, we're going to structure our webinar around that and look into resources that are made available for women business leaders, and to try to spotlight and highlight some of the regional women business leaders throughout Southeastern, South Central Illinois. So going to be an excellent one. Very much looking forward to that. But again, thank you for everybody for attending today. We hope that you found today's presentation informative. Have a good day.